we're blessed because one of the reasons I'm a religious scientist is, and I've said this before here, is because Ernest Holmes, our founder, said, always be open at the top. And what he was saying to us is, I'm not the end-all and be-all. I've taken the ancient wisdom teachings from many, many religions and from the New Thought, from Greek philosophers, and I packaged them into a new way of looking at ancient wisdom. But after me, there will be others who will come, and they will have new packages, and they will have new ways of bringing these ancient wisdoms. Nothing is new. These are ancient, ancient teachings. And so today we're very blessed because we have a woman who received information from the Master Teacher Jesus and wrote a book called A Course of Love. Now, I had never heard of A Course of Love. Dr. Mary Bell teaches a class based on this book. And I took it home a couple of times, and it was really, I loved reading out of it. It brought me warmth to read out of it. And so one day she said, Reverend Georgia, could we have Mari come here? And I thought, well, she's a kind of famous author. This book is taking off all over the United States and, in fact, all over the world. People are beginning to take what they learned in A Course in Miracles and advance it through this course of love that I'm not too familiar with. But no matter what she was talking about, you don't say no to Mary Bell, see? So here's the thing. I said, of course, we would love to have her. Now this is a beautiful thing, and I want to just talk about receiving a minute, because in religious science, we teach that anybody can take dictation from the divine. It is not that some people are anointed and have this gift given to them while others don't. It is, in fact, that everybody has the gift, and some are receptive to the gift. And so when others call channeling and others call receiving, as Mari does, or as other people call religious science, I notice now the minister saying this was downloaded to me. Whatever you want to give it in terms of a name, basically what she's doing is taking dictation from the divine. And we can all take dictation from the divine. And then we get to share our dictation with one another, which is what she's doing now. So you please join me in welcoming Mari Parron. Mari?
Thank you. This whole service makes me want to just abandon everything that I was going to say, and I don't know if I can say enough ad lib to be a good sermon. This is my first time doing this. And just with what Reverend Dr. Georgia just said is so true. I have seen this spirit coming in and back out of you. And that's basically what my receiving was. The only kind of difference is mine came out on paper. And so, I had this inspiration, and it came back out, and I had to type it. And this is what, in 3 years, I typed from the words of Jesus. And, of course, there were also many, many feelings involved. And really what Jesus does in this course is says, your minds have really gotten the better of you. You're putting in too much effort. You're putting in too much thinking. You're trying to figure things out too much, and that's not ever going to work. You have to come back to your heart. He says, love gives reason its foundation. And so, with that opening of love giving reason its foundation, Jesus takes us through 3 distinct books. And the first one, the main aim is our own wholeheartedness. Sort of like first, it's like give up the mind, come back to your heart. And then we get to this point where we're asked to reunite mind and heart in wholeheartedness, to come to union. And receiving a book like this isn't particularly easy for a Catholic like me. I didn't know how to tell people I was getting something from Jesus. And I also, well, it was just funny when friends as well, and I have not lived a stellar life. I didn't do anything that made me a good candidate for being a receiver for Jesus. And so this one friend of mine, when my book was published, he says, well, what's it about? And I did this quick thinking, because he's an epidemiologist, not a faith-based person. I thought, what am I going to say about this? I didn't want that scorn, of saying, oh, well, I received this from Jesus. And so I just said, it's about uniting mind and heart. I said, you know how it can be where you have this, your heart is telling you one thing and your mind is telling you another, and you just really need to get it together. And I said, man, that's really true for me. I was so in my head. And his mouth dropped open and his chin was practically on his chest, and he said, you were in your head? When were you ever in your head? And so this is what people don't know about tender-hearted people, I think, is that they go home and they bring it all up here, and we try to figure it out, and we try to find the best way to kind of maneuver things so that love goes our way. So that was the way I had been. I had been a very tender-hearted person who also brought all the wounds of my tender heart to my head. And I was all of that by the time I was 15. Because, I think I always had this sense. There were two things that I wanted. I wanted to be able to really be myself. I wanted to be something that I felt I knew I was and no one else knew I was. Do any of you remember feeling that way as a child? Like from a very, very young age, you just sort of have this sense. And yet no one confirms that sense, and they have these other expectations. And so what happens is you kind of turn against yourself and you start becoming someone else. But I kind of had this sense still. And I was really irritated by not being known, and particularly by being with people all the time, and family and school and everything, and they didn't know me. And I couldn't know them. And so there's sort of this turning point in my life when I was 15, and I went to this retreat my sophomore year. I was a Catholic girl, Catholic high school, and I didn't really particularly fit in. But at this retreat, we're there all weekend, and we're with these Franciscan fathers who are keeping us up and doing these encounter groups, and we're all crying, and found out everybody had the same kind of feelings I did. And they had the same problems, and they had depth. I was like, whoa, life is going to be different from here on out. And then I went back to school on Monday. And everybody's masks were back up, and I was brokenhearted, and I just determined I'm not going back there next year. Well, you can see how much of a chance I gave it. That was the end of the school year. That was an end of the school year retreat, and I was like, I ain't come back here. I got that glimpse. That glimpse was so important to me. I wanted that. But I didn't go back. And I was in my 40s before I really found what I was looking for. And I really found that great depth of knowing and being known. Being able to be who I am and being able to be who I am with other people. And getting to know them like they were me almost, that really deep knowing. And this is what I feel this course is really all about. It's about bringing us to the kind of intimacy that we want, the kind of love we want to have for ourselves and for each other and for God. And one of the things that I wanted to express here today is about longing and desire. In the kind of spirituality that I've been involved with, which isn't much. I was Catholic, and then I read A Course in Miracles and was just stunned by it. And then I kind of had a little bit of experience with A Course in Miracles groups, which kind of took the life back out of me in a way. I didn't see it the same way. I didn't see life as an illusion, or I didn't want to get rid of myself. I wanted to bring myself back. And what seems to me to have been the big places in my life that propelled me and that brought who I was back and that brought love to me came from longing and desire. And I mention it because I don't hear anybody talk about it anymore. But when I see these musicians up here, I think there's this great longing and desire for expression behind that. When I see people saying, I was called to the ministry, there's great longing and desire behind that. And really that's what pulled me along, was this great longing and desire that would get to these brinks, and then there would be the breakthrough. And one of those was this course coming. One of those was a call that showed up as in a dream, as you can no longer sell your mind for money. Your mind belongs to God. And I had no idea what that meant. But it kept calling me and pushing me like I had a hand at the back of my back, like, you got to go somewhere else. You got to do something else. And being a Catholic, I went and talked to my priests and ended up teaching CCD religion for a year. But I knew that wasn't this call. That wasn't this call. So my husband lost his job. I quit my job, then my husband lost his job. I was at the end of my rope. So I was in that longing and desire when I was met by Jesus and began to receive this course. And so I just want to say, that's what I wanted to really bring up today, is to give ourselves the openness, because longing and desire doesn't necessarily feel peaceful. It can be harsh, and it's soulful, and it can be melancholy. But Jesus actually says in this course, and I don't know if I can tell you, I've abandoned my notes once again. I always make these notes when I'm going to talk because I don't think anything will come out. Talking has not been my way. Well, anyway, I'm not going to find the note, but he says, and I believe, that longing is what gets us to recognize love. That's how we begin to recognize love again, is through a longing that comes to us. It might be from that memory we had as a child. We had a longing of who we were. And it begins to rise up again as longing to be that again. I always call, as you were kind of referring to, self-love as the last frontier. That's what I call it. Our self-love is the last frontier. But it's available. It's available to us to cross that last frontier and find the love that brings our hearts and minds, and as is said here, all the wisdom traditions together, and lets us know that we are all the manifest works of God. Amen. Thank you.
So Mari has books over here if you're interested in getting one. You know, I'm so interested in texts that talk about opening the heart before we get to the mind, or after we get to the mind, or when we get to the mind, that our heart is continually being open. You know, like Mari, I grew up Catholic. And when we were Catholic kids, one of the nice things that you would get would be called these holy cards. Some people call them prayer cards. And my favorite prayer card, my favorite holy card to get, and I would trade friends until I got it, kind of like baseball cards, was the one of Jesus with the heart glowing. Do you remember that? Those of you who are Catholic, you remember that heart? You know, and it wasn't the right Jesus, a white guy with blonde hair and everything, but I love the part of the heart just being open and the light coming out, that sacred heart. And that's what we're looking to become more familiar with, is our sacred heart in our lives. So, you know, Ernest Holmes used to say, I do meditate, but more than meditate, I contemplate. I spend sometimes a whole day contemplating one piece of scripture or sacred text. It could be the Bhagavad Gita or the Quran or the Bible or the Torah. It could be anything. But I take a time to contemplate that. And that's what this book has yielded for me, is an opportunity. I don't have time to take the course from Dr. Mary yet. It might be a day I will, but yet I don't. But I do have time to open sacred text and begin to contemplate its beauty for myself. So I encourage you to just thumb through it, see if it's interesting for you. And don't forget this workshop this afternoon, because we all need more self-love. The one thing that we do the best is talk bad to ourselves. And then we treat ourselves based on how we're talking to ourselves. So let's do the practical work also with Anita Ross to get through that and begin to love ourselves in a big way. Because once you love yourself, you know, those people who just worked your last nerve, they're not so important anymore because you love yourself in such a way. Let's take this message into prayer, knowing that we're in the heart and the mind and the very essence of God, whether you call that God Allah or Elohim or the sacred grandmother tree, whatever name you give that presence, infinite intelligence, divine wisdom, whatever you give that infinite intelligence, you are not and it, you are as it. It is all of you. Now, you and I can't be all of God. We can't even wrap our head around how big God is, but God is all of us. And when we recognize that, the outer begins to change. This church is made up of people with firm intentions to love whoever comes through the door. A young mother who's at her wit's end comes through that door and we just love. Whoever that is. The executive who just needs some more meaning to his soul. We just love. We don't have to fix anybody. We just love. I give thanks for that. I thanks for the Board of Trustees for creating an atmosphere in which we can gather and love and laugh and pray and cry together. I give thanks. I release this word into the law, and together we say.